So welcome to the Barrett channel, welcome back to all our viewers. We're here in Shanghai and we're doing a chat with Simon, and Simon is a native Chinese YouTuber out of Shanghai. So, okay, let's go.
Yeah, we can do this.
So tell me what got you into doing YouTube, because as you know, many people in the West think that Chinese don't know about YouTube because it's kind of forbidden in China.
Right.
So how did you get into it?
I think I've been doing YouTube for like a year now, and I didn't know YouTube before I go to the US. So I think it was around like 2013, and then I went to the US for like my master degree. Then I started watching YouTube like here and there, and then didn't do YouTube until I come back to China. But I didn't give up my like watching habit. Like I always like have some free time watching YouTube. But I saw some foreigners doing YouTube in China, so I was like, yeah, why not like try to do some YouTube. And when I got back to China, I work in a Chinese company, so which didn't have given me a lot of like opportunity to keep practicing my English. So I was like, yeah, maybe, having a little bit of challenge for myself, doing some videos and at the same time, keep practicing my English and letting the world know like how an average Chinese think about China. So that's my original thought about like.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And before YouTube, were you producing content on any Chinese platforms?
No, I didn't.
No. And do you now? Do you upload to Bilibili or any of the
No, I
other
didn't.
platforms? No, so you just into YouTube.
Yes.
And was it a way to try and like you say, tell the West a little bit more about China? Because my opinion from coming from a Western country is that when I was growing up, all the images I saw of China, so I'm sort of a bit older than you, but when I was growing up, all the images on our TV in the west of China was like old China. So Beijing, everybody wearing the grey clothes, riding the bicycle with a little red book. And still this is the image of China in many Westerners' heads, and they still think it's very like not a very developed country and that. So my idea was to try and show that. And is that something similar to what did you find that when you were in the States, that people have a very negative view of China?
To be honest, I didn't find much information regarding to China when I was in the States, because probably people just don't completely pay attention to China at all. I mean, like when I was talking to my colleague or my classmates, but I do find some part-time job on the side, and they are not familiar with China at all. Like when I told them I'm from Shanghai, they were like, oh, okay, Shanghai. They have no clue about Shanghai. They only know the capital is Hong Kong.
Sure, yeah.
They don't even know Beijing. So I was like, yeah, maybe people from the United States are like more focusing on their own country. So they're not, I would say 99% of the population don't even realize what happens in China. So maybe they don't have that intention because they are also a very developed country. So I guess that's what I observed. So,
okay. Because I always feel that, certainly in the UK, and I see a lot in the American press and other press around Europe, that they're kind of negative about China, in the sense that even when it's something good development and that, they're negative. And why do you think that might be? What's your thoughts on that maybe?
Well, that part is pretty tricky. I think definitely there are a lot of like exaggeration. Like just take my own experience in the past like 20 or even 30 years. Like we do see a huge improvement in terms of like public infrastructure, and like skyscraper all over the place, high-speed railway station, right? Like and highways.
Yeah, I mean, you guys infrastructure here is amazing.
You guys from UK, you probably will feel more than me because you guys are from a developed country, which probably haven't changed too much in the past 20 or 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Like here, everything is so efficient. Like 5 years, new metro station, 2 more years, another building pop up around your community. So it's a lot of like fast growing stuff. But in terms of the negative like image from the West, I think.
Do you think that there's some jealousy there by Western nations? because China has done. So if I would look at the US, I say the US have spent a huge amount of money. They've invaded countries. They've spent a lot of money on their military. They really spend a lot of money on that. Where China don't do that. They don't go around the world invading other countries, but they've spent their money on infrastructure, and that has made a massive difference, I feel, to people's lives here. You know, I guess if you asked almost any Chinese, they definitely say their life was better than even just 20 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with this part. Like the majority of Chinese people here, they have seen, I would say they have seen like huge improvement in terms of like public infrastructure, and a lot of people like their income have drastically improved. Like take my mom as an example. He is a doctor in Shanghai, so he used to make like 100 kuai maybe 25 years ago or like 30 years ago, but here right now maybe not as much as, you know, the US or developed counterpart, but life has been
more than
improved, you know, considerably.
Yeah, that's really good.
I think why the Western has a, how to say, I think there are like two sides of China. Just take my own experience. I mean, yes, we have a huge improvement in terms of like average people's life, public infrastructure, and, you know, healthcare, education, a lot of the stuff. But in some other part, I have to say we do have something haven't done very great. Maybe like the political structure is still not as advanced as the US or like other developed country. So maybe there's some misunderstanding, but my part is that we do see improvement in like all those like things the government has been built. But we also want to go even further. Maybe like in the future we can be more involved in, you know, making the decision of the future of the country. Right now we are still, you know, in a society where basically the government will do all the decision for the citizens. Here maybe it's good, you know, to a certain point, because we have seen massive improvement. But, you know, as a citizen in China, I think in the future we will want to see more and more involvement, you know, for citizens. You know,
is there any mechanism currently in China for citizens to have an input into the government?
We do have the like Congress, like local representative, but well, this part I don't know about this, but I have participated in in this before, but still it's usually very limited, I would say.
Because I also read that, you know, from time to time, the government officials at top level here will meet with like some of the big entrepreneur kind of people like Jack Ma.
That part
from Alibaba. So to a certain extent, they have a sort of shaping of some government policy, maybe like in an advisory role. Do you think this is a...
economy-wise, definitely. Like I would say the Chinese government are the most aggressive. Like how to say, they want their economy to be strong. Be strong. So in this part, they are really aggressive. They take a lot of initiative. Like they talk with the. They build all kind of, you know, incubator or like. Meet with all those like how to say those entrepreneurs to, you know, to ensure the economy
is growing.
Yeah.
You see, I'm very interested in I believe that having a one-party state in China has been very beneficial to China. The reason I say that is because if you look at the UK or the US system, so in the UK every 5 years we have a different government. So what this causes is decisions don't get made, because every big thing is used as a political football, so sometimes the party that's in power, they come up with some proposals, and even if it's a good idea, maybe the other party oppose it just because they're the opposition.
On a different side, you know.
So take for instance like high-speed rail, right? In the UK they've been talking about having high-speed rail for more than 12 years, and as of today we don't even start this project because it's one to another, then one government gets voted out and another gets voted in. So it makes and the other example I use this is India. So if you go back 20 years, you could argue that India and China were at a similar level. But now you look at the difference, there's a huge, huge difference. And this is, again, I have some good friends in India say the government just don't make decisions. Where I feel here in China, a decision is made and they get on with it. And I think this has been very, very beneficial to the people of China.
Well, this part, I might have a slightly different opinion than you,
cool.
so we can talk about this.
Yeah.
So first of all, of course, like the one-party country definitely have a huge advantage in terms of like building all those public infrastructure, because once the leader make the decision, everybody will follow, right?
Yes.
And a lot of people they're out of their way to ensure all the public infrastructure are made. And also you don't have a different voice over here, so naturally like the speed of making those development is way faster than any like democratic country in the world.
Absolutely.
For sure. But on the other side, we do have to sacrifice a certain personal interest in terms of for making all those things happen.
Sure.
So I think I would say the West and China will. It's better. Maybe we can find something in the middle, like where that's the ideal part. But of course, might not never happen. But I mean, in a Chinese perspective, I think at the end of the day, like people always tend to like things that they don't have.
Yeah, this
right?
is very true.
That's very true. Like you guys from the West, you think, wow, those public infrastructure are so advanced.
Yes.
Like the high-speed railway can almost take you anywhere in China. Right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
In the UK, like train is almost
it's terrible.
Exist,
yeah.
right? You can take the plane.
That's right.
Everything's so slow. Like nothing got changed maybe in the 10 or 15 years.
That's absolutely right.
So so China, we have huge improvement, but we don't have some sort of like involvement in terms of making a decision for the country.
Sure,
we, in our perspective, we already have those kind of amenities. I mean, like those public infrastructures.
Yeah.
So maybe people are just being greedy. We always want more about.
I think you're right saying that a balance between the two would be good. Yeah, I mean, what I find is it's the and Western things, communist, but actually it's not. In Western people's minds, sometimes it's like they think China is maybe like North Korea. But actually, many people in China say it's communist with socialist aspects, which I think is right. When I first arrived in Shanghai 12 years ago, it was very different to what I imagined. Now, I understood it wasn't like old China with everybody, all at one level, but I was shocked at how kind of capitalistic it is. And that really opened my eyes. I'll give you an example. Oliver's grandmother, not my mother, but his other grandmother, when Oliver came and said, they have supermarkets in China. So this is the Western thinking, is that China is still a very sort of underdeveloped country, and that really surprises me. And on the other side of that coin, I feel that many Chinese people who have not traveled out of China have the opposite opinion of the West. They think the West is these super developed countries and everything's. I have a friend who came to the UK and she sees somebody stolen something. She says, "Wow, you have people who steal things in the UK, because I thought everybody has such a good salary and everybody's so well educated." And actually, it's not true. We have many social problems. Many
I noticed
people
that. So in China, like the security-wise, definitely have huge improvement. I mean, when I will grow up, like when I was like 10 or 11 years old, like I remember like some of our neighborhood, they all have those kind of like pocket
some
lifter.
petty crime.
Yeah. Like on the bus, they have those like thief, and they were gonna go after those like students. But now we do have massive improvement. Like at least in Shanghai, you don't see thief at all. Like nobody's gonna steal things because everything is in our phone, right? Yeah. So it's a huge improvement. I think because China kind of like limit the things you can do here. Like they got cameras everywhere. Like so, to a certain point. in terms of like safety wise, you feel safe in the country. Like you can go out on the street without any issue. Like in Shanghai, in Shenzhen, I assume it should be the same.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. I mean,
in the middle of the night, there's no worry. Like everybody tend to. I think just based on my own like observation, I think citizens in today's China, I would say they're like way more obedient than people from the West or from Europe. Like you guys will go strike or like having or kind of maybe you have people like how to say stealing stuff or like homeless people wandering everywhere. They just don't want to work.
This is really the personal safety. I've traveled to many cities in the world, and I feel safer in Chinese cities than anywhere, and what's strange is again the West misperceive this and go, the government's spying on everybody in China. They watch you when you go to the shops, what you buy, and this and this and this. And actually, if you look at London, they have more cameras per capita than almost anywhere else in the world. And actually, I feel the Chinese government don't really have the want to spy on everybody. I think it's more if you're doing something wrong. And actually now I notice also in the UK that the police there are, now we're going to use facial recognition here. But the difference when it's reported in the media, so they report facial recognition technology in China in the Western media. Oh, look at the Chinese government want to control all their people. But the same story is reported about the West, and it's, this is great because it's going to stop crime. So there's these double standards of reporting in the media, and I always feel that whenever it's a Chinese story, they're much more negative about it, even if it's the same basic story.
Yeah, I think definitely there's a certain type of double standard just based on your story. I think personally, I think to a certain point, because media, they want to attract more viewers, because their priority is not to, like I mentioned in my previous video, like not to make the world a better place. They want to generate more profit. They are responsible essentially for their advertiser, for their sponsor. So maybe they are making the story what people actually want to hear, not actually has happened.
Sure.
Because I assume like the majority of people from the West still have a negative image towards a authoritarian regime. So maybe that's what they want to hear. Because if you have a different story, like telling the West those cameras are actually protecting the citizens in China, maybe those Westerners don't believe that, or they don't have the interest to click into that news to read it.
Yeah.
So but on the other side, I also want to say like I think one of the other reasons why people have such negative feeling or insecure feeling towards all those cameras, because the government is not very transparent. So I assume maybe we should keep improving on that. So to clear some of the misunderstanding. So on my stand of just based on my perspective, I think the Chinese government can also take some initiative, like to clear some misunderstanding. Like there's some misunderstanding between the West and the Chinese. I think the best way for us to clear those misstandings, to let Chinese people come to YouTube or come to those media to tell their story about like how China looks like in their Chinese people's perspective. So maybe that can, and also I'm gonna say, because I have limited like knowledge about how the government works in the West, but in China maybe we can get country or get people more involved, and so maybe people can know how do they actually implement or utilize those like camera system, and whether they are listening to people or not. So I think that's
sure.
I think we do have need to improve, to be honest with you, censorship or like is a thing in China. So to a certain point, I think we do tend to, in the West, people still have a little bit more freedom,
yeah.
right? You know, I mean, maybe YouTube's also censor people. I mean, they do demonetize a lot of stuff, but still you can find people within different perspectives making content on YouTube without any issues. But
that's not always the case here, right?
Yeah. That's not. But still, you have a certain degree of freedom. But in China's media or like Chinese video platform, we have very limited, we have very limited, you know, how to say, rights, freedom of expression. So maybe we can keep improving on this part. So hopefully in the future we can meet somewhere in the middle, to clear some understanding.
Sure. So interesting point here. I often look at the are you aware of the South China Morning Post, right?
Yeah, I know.
So this is potentially a Hong Kong media, but it's owned by Jack Ma, right?
Yeah, correct.
And I'm actually quite surprised that sometimes there's some quite negative articles about China in this publication.
Yeah.
But although it's owned by Jack Ma, who's a Chinese national, this is kind of interesting for me because I would have thought that, you know, people talk about the censorship, but yet they go ahead and publish. Do you think that's because it runs out of Hong Kong?
I'm gonna say just based on my own observation, I think because the majority of people won't be able to see the South China Morning Post because it's, first of all, it's based in Hong Kong, and I don't think you can access the website without a VPN. I don't know. So because the majority of Chinese people can see the website, access the website, so might be the government won't put too much influence on that. So you know, and also Hong Kong, because we are still under the, you know, one country, two systems. So they are under a different system, so they might enjoy a little bit more freedom in terms of like media.
Okay.
So
Okay. So another subject I want to ask you. I know from your videos that you're married to a Taiwanese woman, and that is quite surprising because I always feel between China and Taiwan there's a little bit of tension. And I'm just wondering how you come to be married to a Taiwanese woman.
So my auntie, so I think she's my mother's little sister. She's married to a Taiwanese guy, a business guy. So for like how many years? Almost 30 years now. In 2013, she invited me over to Taiwan, and I had a chance at that time met my wife over there. We kind of met over there, and then we started dating, and then And is there anything in your relationship that you find difficult to talk about that? Does she have a different view to you, or do you share a similar view on? Oh, for sure, yeah. We have quite a different views in terms of like a lot of things, because first of all, we do speak Mandarin, like Chinese mainland people from mainland China, they speak Mandarin, and people from Taiwan, they also speak Mandarin.
Sure.
But we were like raised by a very different system, and all the education are, I would say, almost totally different. So of course we will have a different kind of value, different kind of perspective in terms of a lot of issues. Like,
but it's about respecting each other's view.
I think
right?
I think the greatest the most helpful things you can do to help people understand each other is by like thinking on their perspective. Like, what if I were her, or if I were him, what would I do? I mean, if I was growing up in this kind of environment, what I would think about, right? I mean, if you put you inside their shoes, you will actually kind of try to understand. Maybe their idea at first time it sounds horrible, but maybe you start thinking from their side, it's starting making sense now. So
that's a little similar with me and my partner. My partner's Chinese and I'm English, and obviously we've grown up in very different cultures. So there's some very fundamental differences in that culture, and so but it's about respecting each other's view. So I'll give you one example of that. So in the West, when you grow up as a child, you're supported by your parents, and then your parents continue to support you. That's very different in China. So when you get to an adult in China, you then sort of kind of return the favor to your parents, and many younger people will support the parents.
Yeah.
So this is very different, because in the West, when we adults and we earn our money, that's our money. It's not that we don't want to treat our parents, but we will treat some gift or maybe pay for a holiday. But here, many people will each month give a part of their salary to the parents, because generally the parents will then live with them, and this is very different from it. And sometimes this is one area which may cause a bit of conflict between me and my partner, because why do we need to give some money to your parents, you know? So it's kind of things like this. But I think the key is that we must respect each other's views, because I can't change her mind, and I don't want to change her mind, because this is how she's grown up, this is her culture, but she also needs to respect my side of it. So I think it's about coming to a compromise in the middle of that, and I just wonder whether that's the same with yourself and your wife from a Chinese mainland Taiwanese point of view, that you just agree to disagree sometimes.
For the family part, I think we share some similarity, because ethnically speaking, we are all like Chinese, right? So we don't have that issue. I just share some of my own experience about the things you have mentioned before. Like, I mean, when I was in the West, I feel like family are like so far away from each other. Like,
family
when you
much
grow up
here.
I mean, when you grow up after you enter college, you're expected to like live by yourself, on your own, right? So, but in China, it's like, hey, just take me as an example. In Shanghai, when you grow up, you're still, the majority of the time, you still will come back to your family. A lot of families, they still live together, and the parents expect to live with you for their almost forever, for the rest of their life. So
people in the West can't believe this.
And I think another reason is because due to the one-child policy, because every family only has one child.
Yes.
So it makes them feel like more precious about the kid.
Yeah.
So when you raise the kid, and you always expect it's my kid, and he always gonna live with me. And then even she or he got married, they will have their own kid, and the grandparents will usually help out to take care of the
kid.
That's an issue, but sometimes I see this as also a luxury. You know, you have your grandparents or like your parents to help out in the family, and also you need to pay back when they are getting older, right?
Yeah.
So I think this part, in the US, it's family are like more individualized. So here maybe we are like more collective here. Maybe that makes sense.
Yeah, generally in the West, you get married and you move out, but in China you get married and you move in with your in-laws. So I think this would cause a lot of problems.
It's really hard to to adapt, because they have probably a lot of different behavior or like habits totally different from you guys. So it's gonna take time to get used to.
I hear many stories from some Chinese girls here that they always have a little fighting with their mother-in-law if they don't see the same, because I think one of the things in China which is again different from the West, there's a massive gap here between different generations, because if you look at the previous generation, they grew up in a very different China to this generation, and we don't have that bigger generation gap in the Western world, because although things have changed, it's not changed so much.
Correct.
Many of the sort of people in their 50s and 60s here grew up at a time when it was very poor. But like your age has seen a much more wealthy society in general. So I think this is a big difference, and I see this sometimes causes.
Speaking to that gap, just wanted to go back to the things you asked me, like do I have any do me and my wife have some huge difference in terms of something. So like I always explain to my wife, like, hey, you need to understand that in China we have a huge gap like wealth gap between different generations, you know. So my grandma or my mom's generation, they are always about like save money, save money. They don't want to spend a lot of huge portion of money on like either clothing or like other stuff or vacation, or like they don't want to go out for dinner. Even they have like they have a comfortable living, you know, they have enough money for their rest of their life, but they still cannot escape from that mindset
because they feel safety to have that
to
money,
have all those money around them. So I need to explain to my wife, or those like hygiene habit. So in China, I don't wash my hand too much. I always try to convince myself, or I always try to remind myself to wash my hand after I get back into the house, and because in China we still don't get used to that kind of thing. But in Taiwan, I think maybe it's a little bit more ahead of us in terms of those hygiene things. So definitely there's some difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I know about this. My partner's mother, she will think it's crazy to spend 30-40 yuan for a coffee. So I think actually that China, I look at people in China and they do save, whereas Western people don't. A lot of Western people now is, we'll borrow money to buy this, borrow money. And I think one way is not the best and the other way is not. I think you have to try and strike a balance of saving some but also enjoying your life. I see a lot of older generation in China, they have a very hard life. But even when they get old and retire, they still don't really enjoy the life because they want money. But actually, eventually they will die and somebody else will spend that money. So I think it's about striking a balance of having some safety of savings, but also having some enjoyment of your life. And I see the younger generation are sort of embracing that more so.
I think the younger generation does definitely change a lot in terms of like saving and spending money. I mean, like my parents' generation or my grandparents' generation, they tend to save a lot of money and they don't spend that much. Even they have a ton of money sitting around and they don't go on vacation, or they just even like, I remember my grandpa, even he got retired, he didn't plan to do any like social activity. He just continue working in their like original spot. So I think that's one of the reasons why China can grow so fast. Not only because the government are doing a great job, but the people, they are also doing they're really taking that momentum, or they want to to make a decent living, not only for themselves but for their future generations. So that's why you see like in the one of the things I want to mention is that when I was in the US, I think the doctor in US, they work very, how to say, they don't work as hard as people from the mainland. Like every day they might only check out like 10 or 15 patients, because I was sick one time and I want to see a doctor in the United States and I had to make a reservation and then come maybe 2 days or 3 days later. But in here in China, maybe the education system is still not advanced as the West, but people work really hard here. Like my mom as an example. She work like she will check maybe even 100 or even 150 patients per day. So and so I would say one of the reasons why China can develop so fast is because the average people here work really hard, and they.
I've seen this. I mean, I think the work ethic of people here is what used to be like in the West in previous generations. Like my parents are in their 80s, and I remember growing up, my mother and father worked really hard, and times are much harder. It was harder in those times. But now I think a lot of people in the West, they don't sort of work as hard. Not everybody, but a lot don't. And I think the other thing is I notice people will just get on with it. Where I see in the West, they will make lots of excuses. I can't do this because of this, because of this, because of this. Where Chinese people, they just put their head down and they get on with it and plow through the problems. And I think that's something, again, why China has done so well in the last 20 years.
I think just like I mentioned before, like you always appreciate things that you don't have before. So China was extremely poor like 30 years ago. So people, the only goal for them is to make money, to have a better living. So maybe they don't care that much about all those problems. But like I said, like the younger generation, they definitely is a little bit different from the older generation, because a lot of them, they already have those kind of like material stuff. So they might not work as hard as their older generation. Just take me as an example. I don't think I can work as hard as my mom. To be honest with you.
That's like the UK, the older generation.
Yeah, so maybe in the future we will also enter that phase. Like people will enjoy more free time, and like more they tend to spend more money than like saving. So like probably will learn from the West.
I think as well is that if you look at the way business is here, if you go back 20 years, China was making very cheap, easy products, and now they've moved up. They're becoming more technology based. All the sort of easy manufacturing is being automated, or it's moving to countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam. So actually the skill level is increasing, so that you need higher education people to do these kind of jobs. And I think that's another thing, and I said that first happened in Taiwan. Many years ago, I used to have a business which sold computer accessories. And at that time, anything plastic, cheap things were made in Taiwan. And then it moved to China, and Taiwan started getting more and more high-tech products. And now that change is happening in China. I look at mobile phones, for example. So maybe 5-6 years ago, Samsung, Apple were the innovators, the leaders. Now it's Vivo, Xiaomi, Huawei are the innovators. All the latest technology is coming on those phones, and that's very interesting. So I see China are moving up, and I think that's great for the Chinese economy too.
I think all those like manufacturing company before, they were still doing the how to say, the dirty job, maybe the low end
mundane,
part. Of course, that they are not like satisfied with staying at the bottom, so they are try to move up the ladder. Try to be create more high tech stuff like the DJI, Huawei, like trying to build their own chip. So definitely in the future they will take that road to be more innovative, to be more get more technology.
And do you think just talking about Huawei, I just want to talk about this bit before we finish up, is that Huawei are a very successful company, and they have some fantastic innovation. They were first with 5G. They have some fantastic consumer products. And in the last 12 months, America have really sanctioned Huawei. They've given them a lot of problems. And they always blame this on a national security thing. How do you feel about that? Do you think that is a really true reason, or do you think they're just really kind of worried that Huawei are overtaking some of their tech companies?
So to be honest, I don't sure about how the US government think. I think there are two parts of this story. The first part is yes, Huawei is becoming more influenced in terms of like the economy, and they are become more innovative. So they actually dominate the 5G technology. So I would say, if you take a look at a business standpoint, yes, I would say maybe the West is afraid of this tech giant, because if Huawei start getting all those market, then they will become
less relevant.
But also on the other side, I do understand, I mean, to a certain point, because Huawei is largely based in China, and it's not a very transparent or like a open country, not as open as the West, so it might give people some misunderstanding about like how Huawei really operate. So I mean, in the West, they can become more welcoming to all those. I think the West should be able to welcome more those companies from China, but also I think China should also take the initiative to become more transparent, to make people understand that companies here are just companies here are just
not really different.
The companies here are not as different. They're not very different from the West.
Sure.
So, because I think I understand some of the people, they worried about, hey, because China it's still not governed by the rule of law. So the government says something, maybe Huawei have no choice. They have to, give all the information.
Yeah, but actually.
In the West, definitely these kind of things also exist.
Yeah,
so
and that's very interesting. You say
that.
I
don't see there's a very easy solution in the recent future.
Mm-hmm.
So we might need to. We can make a video actually talk about this. This can go on and on. So
sure, I think it's very interesting. You see, because when the whole Edward Snowden thing came out in the US, all the big tech companies were feeding huge amounts of information to the government, and I sometimes think that they level this criticism at China. Oh well, the government can do what they want and they can get this information, but actually that's exactly the same as most Western countries as well. Okay, so we'll wrap it up here. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Viewers, I hope you enjoyed what you see, and I hope this will be the start of more collaborations with Simon. It's been a fantastic conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave any comments. There's a lot to comment and think about, so please leave the comments down below, and catch you next time.
See you guys.